Hello all and welcome to TaleInferno. My name is Charlotte and today we're going to be talking about foreshadowing. Now foreshadowing is where an author kind of hints at a future event that will happen in their story. And it doesn't have to just be an author, it could be any kind of storyteller. So it could be a screenwriter or what have you. Anyone who tells a story can use foreshadowing to hint at a future event. Now generally speaking with foreshadowing, it tends to happen at the beginning of stories. Like if it's a standalone story, it will probably happen in the first half of the story, and it just kind of is the very subtle hints that kind of get you guessing, or could be so subtle that you don't even realize it. I mean, there are so many different ways that you can foreshadow. If it's in a series, then the foreshadowing might actually be like, the first one or the first two books of a series, depending on how many there are. I mean, and within those books, because they'll need to have their own events and plotline and everything like that, those books will have foreshadowing at the beginning of that particular installment of the series to say what's going to happen in the book overall. But then it might even foreshadow an event later on in the series. I mean, foreshadowing comes, as I say, in all types. And series, it can get a little bit complicated with layers upon layers of foreshadowing, which I think is really cool, particularly if it's done really well. I think the key to really good foreshadowing is the subtlety of it. I mean, if you're sitting there reading a book or watching a TV show or a film or whatever, and, there's a conversation between two characters and there's just that moment that they say something and it's so obvious that it's hinting to something that will happen in the future, it just doesn't feel good to sit there and know that it's about to happen. And I mean, sometimes when it's so deliberate and not so subtle, we'll sit there and go, oh, well then that can't happen. Like that's being pushed upon too much. And so we'll get those feelings of, well, something else has to happen. There needs to be shock factor. And that might be the case. Maybe as storytellers, we might deliberately fake foreshadow. And then by doing that, we can actually have a sudden really cool event where that foreshadowing was fake. But if that doesn't happen and it literally is really bad foreshadowing where it's so obvious that the storyteller is foreshadowing something and then that actually happens, it can be quite just annoying. I don't know about you guys, but I find it annoying if I ever experience a story and that happens. Like I'm sitting there watching a movie and I'm like, I guessed that 10 minutes into the movie. Are you kidding me? Did I just watch 2 hours for nothing when I just guessed it at the beginning? Why? But yeah, that just might be me. I think some of my favorite kinds of foreshadowing, this particularly happens in books. It has occasionally happened in movies and TV shows as well, but mostly in books. My favorite kind of foreshadowing is where it is so subtle that you don't notice it until after you go back to it, or you could be sitting there going, oh my goodness, that object in that movie or that object written in the book at the very beginning, everything that happened to it, that was very symbolic to what happened to the character. Oh my gosh, mind blown. And then bada bing bada boom, the magic of foreshadowing appears and I'm just in shock. But I love it. I mean, if I'm going back to a story that I've already read before, because I already love that story, and I start to notice those subtle bits of foreshadowing that hint to an event that happened in that story, I think it's when I have those realizations, when I go back and I go, oh my goodness, that's incredible, then I love the story even more. I suddenly have a second experience with it. It's all in the knowledge of it. And that's why sometimes I love going back to books that I've read before, or I love watching movies over and over again, because when you start to notice those subtle signs of foreshadowing, other literary devices as well and techniques, I mean, there are other things that are interesting in that way as well, but we're talking about foreshadowing today. But yeah, it's those things that it's why I love just going back to stories. And I know other people don't, because, once you experience a story, you can't experience again, all that kind of argument. Well, I don't agree, personally. But that's only because I love picking up all those little things, and foreshadowing is a big part of that. I think a main point that should be covered here is that foreshadowing can happen in various different ways. I mean, it's really up to the storyteller how they decide to hint at what's about to happen. I mean, it could be like parallel events happening or parallel storylines that are causing the foreshadowing, where one storyline is, or another narrative is being spoken about later, like during the main story, and it goes hand in hand, you know, like that kind of foreshadowing. Or it could be really, really, really symbolic. I mean, it could be like at the beginning, you do all this beautiful descriptive stuff of the setting, and that particular setting could be really symbolic about what's happening. I mean, maybe like the weather or something. Like maybe like a tree falling down might symbolize something that will happen later on in the story. Like maybe the tree falling down symbolizes a character falling down, like maybe in their career or something. Who knows? But it could be quite symbolic in that way. Or it could be, you know, again, symbolic, but from an object perspective, like a vase or a computer or whatever. And I think I mentioned it before, but I'm going to mention it again. It could also be done in dialogue with characters. I mean, a character could say something and that would equal to something that will happen later on. But yeah, as I said, it really could be anything. It could even be like a character doing something that symbolizes a future event, or a decision that they make that will foreshadow to a future event. Again, it varies, and it's really interesting to see different storytellers do foreshadowing in different ways. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. I mean, I kind of rambled on a little bit there about talking about why I love foreshadowing so much and all that kind of stuff. I kind of got carried away, but when don't I ever get carried away? But yeah, I hope that you liked hearing about foreshadowing. If you're a writer or a storyteller in some kind of way, I would definitely recommend doing foreshadowing in your stories. Or don't. Do what you like. Do whatever your creative heart desires, your storytelling heart desires. But yeah, I think foreshadowing is a great literary technique and device to have in stories. It provides us with an opportunity to try and guess what's going to happen. And I really like that aspect of storytelling. Anyway, that's it from me. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content. Check out TaleInferno at www.taleinferno.com to see all the other content that's being created. And yeah, remember to ignite the story, and I'll see you again soon.